Hey, hey, Lumio lovers. Welcome back to another Lumio live stream. Hey, ladies, how's it going?
Hi. Hi.
Hey there.
We are your hosts. My name is Asha. I have Mish and Lois here, and today it's all about hands-on learning. And so we have a really awesome lesson on that here for you guys today. And if you would like to join along with us and follow along live, you can go to class code. What's the class code again?
181.
181461. Almost forgot it.
It feels like a very Monday, Tuesday today. You know what I mean?
Indeed it does. Well, let's jump into this awesome lesson.
All right. Thanks for that kickoff, Asha. Welcome, everyone, to another Lumio Live. We're super excited to be talking about critical thinking today and how we can make critical thinking accessible for our students. So, I was chatting with my gals here earlier today, and we were talking about some different ways or different reasons why it's super important that we're teaching our students all about critical thinking, right? It helps them to make better decision making, enhancing problem solving, greater independence, resilience to misinformation, and also like workspace and real world preparedness. What do you think, you guys?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, how can you be a lifelong learner or a lover of learning, right, without having those critical thinking skills?
It's so important, and there's so many different ways in our classrooms that we can build in critical thinking opportunities. But then I think about my students that may need my learning to be a little bit more accessible. And something that I very often think about when making a critical thinking lesson accessible is giving them multiple formats, both presenting it to them, but also for them to participate in different ways as I present to them different types of critical thinking opportunities. So let's get started with our first one here. And I might just ask my students a very simple question, because as we're learning about critical thinking, it's important that we start with just a demonstration of simple questions and then kind of build into more complex critical thinking opportunities as it pertains to what we're learning about, maybe like social studies. So we'll see what we talk about today. So, my first question that I might ask my students is, should students have a say in what they learn in school? So, I might ask my students to first participate in this independently, maybe just gather their own thoughts all on their own. Why should students have a say in what they learn in school? And the tool I'm using here is Response, which is our version of a quiz. And if you do a short actually creates a word cloud with all of our students' responses. So it's really cool to see those responses grow. Why should students have it in school? It looks like yes, they should, but why? I'll give everyone a second to think about that. And as you're thinking about that, one way that we can make learning more accessible as well, especially as it pertains to critical thinking, is really incorporating technology, because there's so many different tools you can use specifically in Lumio to really get those students' voices going no matter where they're at with their learning. So as we get these questions, YEPS helps for self-advocacy. That's awesome. We're going to explore a few other different ways we can make critical thinking more accessible in our classroom, especially with some technology tools we've got right here in Lumio. All right, I'm going to move forward here. So after my students have been given that chance to really answer that question on their own, one way to make it more accessible for them is really group workspace, because there's such a power in helping our students really learn from each other, having that support from each other. Maybe if it's a language barrier, or maybe they can model work. There's just so many benefits that come from group workspace. So all I've done here is I've pulled a graphic organizer, which is one of our ready-made resources. And with my students, I might convert this into a group workspace. So I would go right over here to my people, and I convert to a group workspace. And what would happen here is it would generate small groups for me like this. And then your students won't argue like, oh my gosh, Miss G, you always put me with Asha and Lois. It does it for you right on the screen here. And you can manipulate those as well. And then what happens when you click start that workspace? It will create kind of a combination of like an individual handout and a whole class whiteboard. So every group gets their own space. But what I love most about this, and I'm just going to skip ahead because we might have done a little bit of pre-work here just to show you. There's so many different ways for our students to participate in this activity. So on my end, a teacher, I went ahead and I recorded myself giving instructions on this page. If students do need that extra moment to listen to the instructions once more, and then also, I reminded them that there's different ways for them to provide their response as well. So you can see on the screen a few different, right? So we have a few students that typed their response, and then we also had someone record themselves. So, Lois and Asha, why do you think students should have a say in what they learn in school?
I totally agree with just the fact that it empowers students. I can remember certain classes or even certain lessons that I really enjoyed, and it was because it was something that I was really interested in, and I excelled in those classes. So I think that empowerment feature or that factor is super important for the students.
I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that's true. And I think when students learn these skills, it really prepares them for roles requiring analysis and effective communication in the future, right? I can see we have some people joining us online on YouTube. So we'd love to hear what you all think about critical thinking skills and why that's important.
I was taking a look at this question. It actually reminded me of my ACT question when I had to do the essay portion. I know some parts of the US did the ACT, some did the AC. What did I say? ACT, SAT. They sound almost exactly the same. But my question was so interesting. It was back in the day, there was more of like I don't know if it was like a requirement, but like a social etiquette to dress nicer when we went out in public. And now it's a lot more acceptable to kind of go out in more comfy clothes, athleisure, if you will. And so my ACT question was, do you think that we should kind of go back to that like proper dressing social etiquette? I think the question literally said like loafers and dresses and things like that. Or is the new norm okay? And so I think like when we're thinking about critical thinking, this also really helps us to write essays or again to kind of have really healthy discourse with people, right? We have it with our family, with our friends, with our coworkers, and it's okay to disagree, but helping them to really critically think and think of those supporting points and being able to document this way is so helpful.
I agree 100%. And the great thing is with Lumio, there are all sorts of ways to help make critical thinking more accessible, right?
Exactly. And one other way that we can make critical thinking accessible is also encouraging our students to have different perspectives. So, engaging students with assignments that explore multiple viewpoints. So, right here, kind of going into social studies, I had this question of, was the American Revolution justified, or could the colonies have found a different way to resolve their issues with Britain? I'm encouraging my students to really think that there really could be two answers. Like they could have done X, or they were justified because. And again, reminding them, as you can see here on the screen, there's again different ways for them to participate. They can type out their responses, they can record themselves. And what I also love is coming right over here in my gallery and adding in a little sticker to agree or disagree or to add a little thinking cap of what someone else said.
I love that. And I love that when you're using Lumio, you can actually offer constructive feedback, giving specific feedback to refine each student's critical thinking over time, right? So maybe they're on the right track, but they needed some more information. Or maybe I think a very important part of critical thinking is being able to cite your sources and determine whether that's a reliable source, right? So kind of asking like, how did you determine that that was a reliable source and what type of source was that?
Absolutely. And then I think right before we kind of close out and talk about a few more things here, my other favorite part of doing something like this in Lumio, which is something that could be very verbal, and we think about the kind of students we have, it's so important that we're offering them different entry points to participate. So raising their hand may not be their thing, whether they're shy, they're learning English, maybe they've got some diverse learning needs, whatever their entry point is, being able to come in this way. And then after they document those thoughts, they've had a moment to really think about it on their own independently at their computer, their iPad, whatever it is that they're using. Maybe this will encourage them to then also be able to share it out loud after we've given them this different entry point to kind of gather their thinking first, too.
For sure.
So I wanted to just say thanks everyone for kind of tuning in to talk about critical thinking and accessibility. Later this month, we'll keep talking about different ways you can use Lumio to continue on making your learning accessible for all your learners. But something that we also do every month is a Lumio challenge. Every month we have a different one, and we announce winners that win gift cards, and we all just really want to know how you're using Lumio in your classroom. So last month we talked about how you can use Lumio to encourage hands-on learning in your classroom. We had some awesome winners that provided on social media what they were doing. So using our different games to talk about different parts of speech, and using math and drawing to talk about fractions. So many really cool ways that they were using technology and Lumio to encourage hands-on learning. And this month, you've got to go this month's challenge. Just like we're talking about critical thinking, we're wondering how you are using Lumio to encourage your students to think critically and share their ideas. So, what you have to do, take a screenshot or a picture of a Lumio lesson in action in your classroom. Of course, please blur out your students' faces. And we want to see what you're doing. So, post that on any social media platform: LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. After you post, just go ahead and tag us at Lumio Social. And then you need 2 hashtags: hashtag Lumio Challenge and hashtag Go Lumio. And then at the end of the month, stay tuned and we'll announce next month's winners.
I loved the contest from October, Mish. Like Kimberly's lessons on anatomy and the body. Like, she used so many different parts of Lumio, and you could just see that her students were so engaged. So I can't wait to see what happens for November, because it's Thankful November, and we are super thankful for all of our amazing educators that make learning more accessible. And I never had a really great original idea, but I love seeing what other people do and using that to kind of build on.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone. I'm going to pass it right over to Asha.
Well, thank you so much for this awesome lesson. And if you guys would like to dig deeper and learn a little bit more about Lumio, you can register for our webinars if you go to go.smarttech.com/golumio. You can also find our previous webinars there as well, and so you can get caught up. Thanks again for joining us.